Yo, 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 ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Nothing But Nugs podcast. We took last week off, but don't you fear. We are back this week with a very, very fun episode for you guys. We are part of the Elevated Pulse Sports family of podcasts by the fans, for the fans, diehards only. And, we took last week off because there really wasn't much activity to discuss. But since then, man, oh man, has a lot changed. Fundamentally, not necessarily a lot has changed with the Nuggets, but we're anticipating some big changes soon because stuff just has to happen. Isn't that right, Eric?
It has to happen. The Nuggets, with it's not a new face, but we did match the offer that OKC threw out there for Spencer Jones, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit, but that move pushed the Nuggets into the second apron, the dreaded second apron. And I think a lot of people don't really know exactly what that means. So I think we're going to kind of clear a little bit of air about that tonight. But yeah, there's definitely some things that have to happen from the Nuggets perspective. We heard Josh Kroenke talk about it at the end of the year. I think it was 2 seasons ago, maybe, where he said, the second apron is not a place the Nuggets ever really want to be, and that's the kind of thing that could ultimately make them do the unthinkable, which is potentially trade Nikola Jokic. And here we are, lo and behold, we find ourselves in the second apron. So we, for real, for all the Nugget fans who like watching Nikola Jokic in a Nuggets uniform, this is the time for us to start paying attention to what's going on right now, because I don't think any of us want to see him playing on a different team.
No, we do not. But hey, look, if you were to try to spin this positively, it's been a while since the Nuggets were the only team in the league that were on top of something. And so, for them to be on top of the league in payroll, it's something, right? We're on top of the world in the NBA in something again, Unfortunately, this is probably closer to being in the bottom of the NBA in something. But anyway, man, let's just dive right on into it. Let's start with some NBA news. Obviously, there's some big stuff going on. But, dude, can we just talk about this offseason real quick? This has been one of the craziest offseasons probably of all time. Look at all these names that I'm about to read off that have changed teams, okay? Giannis to the Heat. You got Jaylen Brown to the Sixers. Paul George to the Celtics. Mike Conley made it onto this list somehow. Mike Conley to the Celtics. LaMelo Ball to the Timberwolves. John Morant to the Blazers. Man, Walker Kessler to the Lakers. And then you got Lou Dort and some other quality role players. John Collins, Julius Randle, Mikal Bridges, or not Mikal. What's his name? Miles Bridges. All of these guys moving teams. This is a pretty hectic offseason. And that's not even mentioning the Kawhi trade, because the Kawhi trade is still kind of in limbo as the NBA is still doing their investigation. But with that said, we have to talk about LeBron finally making his decision, man. And I don't think either of us are going to be terribly surprised at this. But obviously, the news has been out now. He's a 76er, 2 years, $8 million, player option for the second year. Bleacher Report did a ranking of every NBA team's starting lineup, and they put the 76ers squarely in the number 1 spot. So what do we think about this? Is the hype with LeBron and Jaylen Brown and Tyrese Maxey, is it legit, or are we kind of getting ahead of ourselves here for other reasons?
I think it's a little bit of both. Look, it's definitely legit because it is LeBron James, and love him or hate him, you can't argue his greatness. He does change the game on the basketball court. It depends. I think where I say it's kind of a little bit of both. The East has gotten better. If the Kawhi trade does actually go through, you've got Toronto with a new big guy. You've got the Heat, obviously, with a new big guy. You've got Philadelphia with a new big guy. You've got the Knicks, who were already defending champions. So I think it could be a little bit of both. The jury is still out on how that's all going to work in Philadelphia, though. And that was something I think you and I talked about before he made the decision was if he does choose Philadelphia, how do they make that all work? Because, you've got Tyrese Maxey, who I feel is one of the, he's probably a top 10, top 20 player in the NBA right now at this point, kind of on any given night. but he's pretty ball dominant. You've got Jaylen Brown, who last year on the Celtics was very ball dominant. You've got LeBron James, who we all know at times tends to be ball dominant. You've got Joel Embiid, who from a center position, I don't know that there's many centers out there who take more free throw shots than he does, which kind of leads you to believe that he's probably ball dominant to some degree. And then you've got VJ Edgecombe, who kind of is like this fifth guy who we all saw last year, kind of rookie flashes, extremely young, talented, athletic guy. My fear is, does he kind of take a step back with his progression? So I think there's still a lot. Look, you throw KCP in the mix there too. I think Anthony Simons, if I'm not mistaken, is on 76 or so. Look, they have a lot going for them. But just because you put a bunch of ingredients that are really good on their own into a pot and mix them all together, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a dish that tastes really good.
Yeah, this is true. They also added Dean Wade, I guess, as well. So this is a very, very different 76ers team. That said, like you said, there are a lot of mouths to feed on that team now. And it's kind of interesting. Shams noted this when he was talking about LeBron to the 76ers, but LeBron is going to play a lot of point guard this year. And funny enough, the last time that he played a significant amount of point guard was in 2019, 2020 with the Lakers, won the championship, had a high quality big man in Anthony Davis alongside of him. And so, I mean, on paper, you kind of like this roster a little bit more than that roster, right? Especially in the Eastern Conference. Even though the Eastern Conference has definitely gotten stronger, you still have a lot of young teams that are still trying to figure it out. You have the Cavs, who are kind of in some kind of limbo, right? They're always up towards the top of the standings in the East and never seem to be able to just take it all the way. They came theoretically close last year by making it to the conference finals. Their progression is there, but there's still kind of a little bit to be desired with the Cavs. Obviously, the Knicks are still formidable. They pretty much have their same team, right? Besides Mitchell Robinson. And I mean, for what that's worth, that should make them still the primary favorite to come out of the Eastern Conference. But nonetheless, this 76ers team, man, it's a solid 3-and-D team. It's got athleticism on paper. Hopefully, if they can stay healthy, then they can translate that paper type of advantage that we see them all having into actual gameplay, or maybe not, hopefully, right? Because you don't really want to face a healthy 76ers team with that lineup construction. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how they finish the season. Obviously, they have technically 2 years of LeBron. If they don't win the championship, though, next season, do you think that LeBron will hang it up and retire and opt out with that player option? Or do you think he might give it the last year of the contract and then hang it up?
I think it just depends on how close they get. If they're kind of like a first round exit type of thing, I could see him saying, okay, it's time to hang him up. But if they make it to the finals and lose in 6 or 7 games, yeah, I could see him definitely saying, hey, we are right there. Let's just run it back and see what we can do. I mean, look, I think now this is just my personal opinion, but I feel like the NBA is one of those sports where more times than not, talent typically wins out. I know I just said you take a bunch of good ingredients, it doesn't always make a good dish, but usually when you take a bunch of guys that are super talented and put them onto a team together, that team typically does pretty well. I think, though, one thing that is kind of, we'll find out about the 76ers, and that's kind of their coaching staff. Because all those names that we just talked about, look, it's the NBA. Regardless whether they want to pretend like they have egos or not, they all have egos in that room. And I think, you look back at the Phil Jacksons of the world, whether it was with the Lakers or with the Bulls in the 90s, I think one of the things that he did really well was kind of manage those egos. It wasn't necessarily, it was the players on the court, but it was those egos that he was managing. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is it Nick Nurse? Is Nick Nurse the coach in Philadelphia? I think that's correct. We'll see how good of a coach he is, because we know one thing about LeBron James. Where LeBron James has gone, usually within 1 or 2 seasons, that typically means there's a new head coach. So it's not always 1 or 2 seasons, but I do think, we'll find out real quickly if he's a LeBron guy or not a LeBron guy. So I don't know. There's just some interesting things we're going to find out. I'm super interested to see if Joel Embiid will actually show up in Denver and play a game in Denver this year, or will he continue the streak and just never play here again. We'll find out. But my guess is with this type of roster, he's probably more likely to play than not play.
Yeah, this is definitely the case. Has LeBron ever played for a head coach who had won a championship prior to him getting there on that team? I don't think he has.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think he has. Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, so in that sense, it's kind of interesting, right? Because you got Nick Nurse, who has won an NBA championship already. So I wonder how much that factored into his decision to go there also, right? If you think about some of the other teams, I mean, obviously Eric Spoelstra, right? One of the best head coaches in NBA history. But the Cavs, I mean, Kenny Atkinson, not a championship head coach. You think about the Western Conference, T-Wolves, not a championship winning head coach. The Golden State Warriors obviously stood out, but that's not a team that he was going to be able to compete with. And so I wonder how that dynamic will go, given what we know about LeBron wanting to be a very active sort of player coach while he's out on the court. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting season watching the Philadelphia 76ers, not just because of the collection of talent they have, but because of the injury history that some of these guys have, the notoriety of some of the guys on this team, obviously. I mean, Philadelphia probably just wins the offseason, even if they hadn't gotten LeBron James. All right. Because they upset Boston last season in the first round of the playoffs. They were not favored to win that series. And then they come out this offseason and effectively steal the best player from that team this offseason. And so it's like to add insult to injury. And then, I mean, you do factor in LeBron as well now. It's like, well, you just completely one-upped the team who had been conventionally seen as the best team in the conference for the last few years. Boston had won a championship not too long ago either. And so it'll be a very interesting Eastern Conference dynamic to watch this season. That said, another signing happened this week. Draymond Green, not that this is necessarily massive news, but when I saw that he opted out of his contract, I was like, oh, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. That might be the end of his time in Golden State. And I guess I just wasn't familiar enough with the situation because Draymond claims that he opted out to give Golden State an opportunity to pursue LeBron, and then he would negotiate his contract after that whole happening had been dealt with. But I mean, Draymond goes back to Golden State. Golden State is not conventionally seen as one of the better lineups in the league right now. I don't remember where they finished in this Bleacher Report ranking, but obviously Jimmy Butler having a torn ACL is not very helpful. But aside from that, I mean, when you think of that Golden State team, do you see a team that can sneak into the playoffs again?
Well, I'm going to first start out by just talking real quickly about Draymond and his contract. So the 1 year, $28 million, that was essentially what his deal was going to be before when he opted out. So it's not like he came in and, scooped up a bunch of money that they left on the table because LeBron didn't sign there. That was his original deal. I do think I get it. I know LeBron didn't sign with Philly for the money. He said that this wasn't going to be a money-driven thing. When you look at 2 years, $8 million for LeBron James, and then 1 year, $28 million for Draymond Green, you kind of scratch your head and say, man, something seems wrong with the NBA when that's the kind of deals that can be made. But good for Draymond. I'm never one to reach into somebody else's pocket and talk about what he's earned it. Now talking about Golden State specifically, look, I do like them. I do think, they've got Kristaps. They do have, I get it, Jimmy Butler coming off of the injury, probably not ideal. You still got the best shooter that's ever played the game and Steph. I like Yaxel Lindenberg a lot. They're rookie from Michigan. Brandon Podziemski doesn't do it for me. I have a son who's a Warriors fan, and he would trade him for a sack of rocks, I'm pretty sure. Um, but do I think they could make the playoffs? Absolutely. I don't think they're going to be a team that competes for a championship, but I think they're, definitely one of the top 10 teams in the West.
Yeah, I would probably agree with you. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of interesting variables on that team, right? They have that young core who I guess they're trying to develop to replace the Stephs and the Draymonds in the next few years. But it's a very interesting team. They're a tough out, especially for the Nuggets, right? I think the Nuggets took 1 or 2 of 3 against them last year. I remember they lost that one game on national TV on a Sunday. And so they're a tough team to play against just in general, especially when you have Steph Curry on your team and he's healthy. But yeah, I mean, not a massive move, right? It's just a continuous situation for them, right? Draymond's been there for years. But it's cool that he was willing to take a potential pay cut to have LeBron come join the team, right? That would have been an interesting situation, right? Now you didn't have to, at that point, you wouldn't have had to worry about LeBron really being a significant competitor. But if that team got healthy, right? And you're thinking 5 or 6 years ago, it's wow, Steph, LeBron, Jimmy Butler, Kristaps Porzingis. Oh my goodness. But oh well, such is life. It's good that he went back to Golden State. I can't really imagine Draymond Green on another team anyway. So
I agree.
Is what it is. Last guy I guess we'll touch on is DeMar DeRozan, just because he's kind of been floating around Nuggets free agency circles as well. He's still a free agent. A few other teams have some interest in him. I think one of them is the Heat. What do you think of DeMar DeRozan? I think we might have touched on this briefly last time we had an episode or the week before, but would you be a fan of DeMar DeRozan coming as a bench piece?
Sure. I do. I like DeMar DeRozan. I think, the guy, he's one of the best mid-range shooters that have ever played in the NBA. The question is, when you start to get into those upper ages, the upper 30s with regards to your age, can you find that mid-range game as easily as you did when you were athletic and quick and things like that? Now, I'm not saying I have not watched enough of his games. I haven't paid a close enough attention to know if he's lost a step. I can only assume, because Father Time is undefeated, that he probably has lost a step. So I wouldn't be upset with him being a part of the Nuggets, roster and rotation. I just really don't see that as being something that the Nuggets are looking at. I really feel like, and we're obviously going to talk about it a little bit more, but I feel like the Nuggets right now are just kind of in this space where they're trying to figure out a way how they can unload cap space instead of bringing it on. So I don't think that they're out there actively trying to find guys that I don't know what DeMar DeRozan is going to cost, but somewhere in the realm, I would guess, of 10 to 12 million a year, maybe less, 6 to 8 million a year. But even at 6 to 8, that seems probably too high for me. Just knowing what the Nuggets are dealing with from a cap space standpoint.
Yeah, it's surprising to me that they were even poking around him because, I mean, you've been trying to re-sign Peyton Watson all offseason. You still have Cam Johnson, Christian Brown dabbles in the 3, and you just re-signed Spencer Jones, and you signed Alpha Diallo. I don't think you really need much more wing depth right now.
Yeah.
Right? It's just my perspective on the situation. But yeah, based on what I've seen, it seems like DeMar might command something in the range of 10 to 15 million a year. And for DeMar DeRozan, at this point in his career, who's still not a good 3-point shooter, shot 49% from the field. I mean, and not the greatest defense, but still not entirely terrible, because he's also playing on the Kings. You got to take that into consideration. A guy who's pretty healthy. I mean, is that someone who is probably worth 10 to 15? Maybe, but not for the Denver Nuggets in our current situation. So I just don't see how that would work out. Would I switch Cam Johnson for DeMar DeRozan? No, absolutely not. So, yeah, I'm surprised that the Nuggets are poking around him. But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he goes. If he went to Miami, that would be a very, very intriguing situation for him, right? I mean, I think Andrew Wiggins is their starting 3 right now. I'm not sure if DeMar would start over him, but it'd be interesting. They'd add some depth at the position, and it would kind of bolster their case to become a challenger in the East now with Giannis and company and Bam. So very interesting situation for DeMar. But yeah, not a fan of him joining this Denver team at this point in time, or really ever.
Yep.
So, oh well, such is life. All righty, let's transition into Nuggets news now. We're going to start with the largest bit of news that's happened over the last week, which is that Spencer Jones was given a 2-year, $12 million offer sheet from the Oklahoma City Thunder of all teams. Now, I think that's kind of important. I might touch on this a little bit later on, but he was given that offer sheet from the Thunder. That would have been an absolute killer loss for the Nuggets, right? Not just losing Spencer Jones, but losing him to a team that would use him perfectly in their system. And so the Nuggets had 48 hours to match, and they matched the contract, obviously, and they retained Spencer Jones with like less than an hour left, I think, or something like it. And so it's good that Spencer's back on the team. I'm curious what you think about that, though, because on our last episode, we had kind of committed to the reality that we were going to let Spencer Jones walk. And so I have a way that I'm processing this that might be a little bit different than yours, but I'm curious to hear what your perspective is on the Nuggets bringing back Spencer Jones, even though they've added a guy like Diallo, who we expected to be his substitution, and still had some pretty solid depth with Cam, Christian Brown, et cetera. But what do you think about the Nuggets re-signing Spencer Jones?
Well, Spencer Jones was a guy that started 40-plus games for the Nuggets last year. I think more than seeing him go, man, I think you hit it on the head, to be honest with you. If that offer sheet came from a different team, if it was not OKC, I bet you the Nuggets let him walk. That's just my gut feeling. I bet they're okay with him going to, an Atlanta Hawks or, a Memphis Grizzlies situation. Teams that just haven't been a thorn in the side of the Nuggets. When you get the team that has, won your division for the last, handful of years, I don't know if you would say they're the main rivalry, but certainly within the division, that speaks for something. And it's a team you're going to have to climb over to get out of the Western Conference. All those reasons were things that said to me, you just can't let a guy who started 40-plus games for you go to that team and help them. I know we kind of saw some stuff online about Sam Presti and, just the way he kind of, I don't know if he forced the Nuggets' hand. And I don't know if that was really his whole goal in doing so by signing that offer sheet with Spencer Jones. I think there was more, hey, this is a really good player that fills a really big hole on our team. And we could do it at a very reasonable price. More so, I do think there was a little bit of gamesmanship there with saying, hey, this is a team in our division that we want to try and, we're going to have to be better than and beat. And we can also tighten the screws on them a little bit by making them, compete with this offer sheet. I think there was some of that, but I think it was more Presti identifying a really good player who could help his team. I think that was probably the bigger driver in them trying to sign Spencer Jones. At least that's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, well, life is chess, right? And so chess involves making a move that has multiple different impacts. And so I could totally see that being a part of it, maybe. But yeah, I think they probably offered Spencer Jones an offer sheet because they genuinely thought he was a good player and a good fit for their system. And why wouldn't they, right? So I think that was probably emphasis number one in that offering of the offer sheet. But I mean, it's tough that ended up putting us in that position too. And so obviously that benefits the Thunder if the Nuggets are the only team in the second apron and also the second best team in their division. And so it served multiple purposes. But yeah, that's exactly where I was going to take it. You were spot on. I was going to say if this was almost any other team, I'm not sure if the Nuggets match it. Right now, they should have matched it. Unquestionably, okay, Spencer's presence on the offensive boards from behind the three-point line and just in general defensively for a guy who was on a two-way contract, right, until they converged him, like absolute diamond in the rough finding. You developed him here in your system. He had to be re-signed. You would have been crazy not to re-sign Spencer Jones. Now, we didn't think it was likely that they would make it happen because we weren't sure how much Spencer Jones was going to ask for. I mean, 2 years, 12 million, it feels legit, but with the crunch the Nuggets are kind of in, we weren't sure if that would be too much for them. Obviously, as we're seeing with Peyton Watson, the Nuggets have kind of been offering significantly lower than guys were wanting or seeking in the free agency market. And so I would not have been surprised if Spencer walked because the Nuggets thought that would be too much money. But yeah, at the same time, it's like, it's good to have him back, right? It's going to add to a backlog now, I think, at a position. The 3, maybe this clears up some room for like a Cam Johnson trade, but maybe we'll get to that a little bit later on. I don't want to jump ahead too much, right? Because there's some interesting stuff that kind of now has to be pulled levers wise with the 3, the position, the small forward. But yeah, good to see that Spencer was re-signed. All that to say, the current roster after Spencer Jones was re-signed now looks like this. All right. So you got your point guard room, Jamal Murray, Tyus Jones, KJ Simpson. He's on a 2-way contract, I suppose. And then at the 2, you have Christian Brown, Julian Strawther. I'm going to say Bryce Hopkins is kind of like a wing. So 2, 3 probably fits better at the 2 at the NBA level, but it has been playing the 3. If you think about small forwards, you got Cam Johnson, you got Spencer Jones now again, and you got Alpha Diallo. At the 4, you got Gordon, Najee Holmes, and then at the 5, you got Jokic and Bagley. Okay, so the Rockies, the Nuggets have 3 standard roster spots left, and they have 2 2-way spots left. And so theoretically, they can't be done making moves because they still have to add guys to fill out this roster. We can kind of use that as a transition into Peyton Watson if we want to, because fundamentally, as you're looking at this team right now, what do you think are the largest holes they have left to fill with those 3 empty roster spots and those 2 2-way contracts?
Well, to me, the biggest, most glaring need is a backup point guard who you can put in to play heavy minutes. Because look, Jamal had a great season last year. It was one of the first seasons where he's been pretty much, we'll call it healthy for the whole season in the last handful of years. But who knows, what's going to happen. I don't want to be in the position if I'm the Nuggets where they're having to run Tyus Jones, out there or KJ Simpson as their starting point guard. I don't think that's a good spot for them. So I think that's something that probably needs to be addressed. When you look at the team, I think they have some good depth. It's questionable depth though at the shooting guard spot because as we talked about with Christian Brown, he's just not a guy who's going to be like a shot creator. He's a guy that will run the court a lot, and maybe that's how they use him the best is, run the court on fast breaks. But that's just a tough thing to do for an entire season. And then we've seen it multiple times, not just with the Nuggets, just in general with regards to the NBA. When you get to the playoffs, the game slows down. You don't have those fast break opportunities like you have during the regular season. So that's where a guy like Christian Brown probably becomes a little bit less effective in the playoffs because he can't play that type of game style. You start to see him, that's where those flaws on his defensive side kind of, even though he might be a pretty good, above average, we call him at least average, but maybe slightly above average defender. But when he's put out on an island time after time after time, and where the rest of the team isn't creating turnovers and he can't get out there and run, then what is he? He's not a guy who's going to be this great spot up shooter from 3. He's not a guy that goes and creates off the dribble and creates his own shot. So that's where you kind of hope that Strawther steps into what we all think he can, hope that he can step into. You've seen flashes from him. We've seen it in the playoffs. We've seen it over his first couple of seasons. But then we've also seen the things that kind of make you scratch your head and say, what was that shot? Like there's 21 seconds left on the shot clock. We didn't need a 3-pointer from, the logo, those types of things. So you kind of hope that those things maybe work through themselves, in training camp and as we kind of lead up to the season. But I mean, the point guard position to me is a huge spot. And then look, I mean, I know we've got Cam Johnson, Spencer Jones, and Diallo as small forwards, but you and I have talked about this. I don't know if it's Peyton Watson. I don't know if it's Cam Johnson. I don't know what that piece is, who they're going to ultimately end up having to move, but they're going to have to move somebody. They're just going to have to, because I just cannot see them getting to this point next season or at the end of next season saying, okay, this is our current roster and what do we do now? Because then we've really hit that point of no return where you've got to start, you have to put everything out on the table. And I think that the Nuggets front office is really, they're too good, they're too bright to let that happen. I don't think they're going to let that happen. So you kind of start to question, well, who is going to be the guy that they move? What kind of draft capital are we going to get back? Because my guess is they're probably not going to get a lot back with regards to players. They might get some role pieces here or there, but you're not going to get, you're not going to send Christian Brown out with I know it's probably, I think his first year next year on the new contract is like 21, 22 million. You're not going to get a $22 million guy coming back. You might get like a $10 million guy coming back. So I don't know. They've got their work cut out for them. But that's, to me, that's kind of the things that stand out. I mean, Zeke Naji is another name. If Aaron Gordon can't stay healthy, are we really going to lean on Zeke Naji?
Exactly.
Okay. I mean, if that's what we're going to do, then it could be a longer season than we hope for.
Yeah, this is true. I'm going to agree with you. I think backup point guard is probably most important right now. Maybe adding a veteran center, maybe who doesn't come in and play very much, but who can be a solid third string, like a DeAndre Jordan type of backup center, right? Someone who has experience, who's been in the playoffs before. I'm not sure who's available out there on the market who fits that build, but like that's the type of center the Nuggets need to go out and get. But backup point guard is definitely a priority. I think I've said this before. I don't have the largest issue in the world with Tyus Jones being the backup point guard with a full offseason worth of working with the team and getting ready to fill that role within the system. I think his skill set is something that we need. I'm just not sure if he can provide enough defensive stability or shooting to really be a solid enough, consistent guy in that role. And so with that said, yeah, backup point guard is definitely going to be an important role. But before we transition into Peyton Watson, let's take a look at some of these comments. First one, I feel like the contract the Nuggets got Jones back on is pretty fair. The Nuggets just don't have a lot of room to sign guys that offer valuable bench depth without putting them over the second apron. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I would agree with that. That's valid. Spencer Jones is on a legitimate contract that he has well earned based on his experience in the league and his production. So yeah, that's completely legit. Would you agree, Eric?
100%. I mean, even though I'll correct the comment, it did push them over the second apron. But no, Spencer, that was a great contract for him. It kind of makes you scratch your head and say, man, who was Christian Brown's agent when they signed that deal? Because I need that guy representing me in every single instance of my life, because I can't imagine a room where they sat down and all agreed on 5 years, 25 million or 120 plus million. Like that to me is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a bit wild. Yeah. I mean, even thinking about Christian Brown, this is actually a thought I wanted to get to that I just remembered. So thank you for inadvertently reminding me. But as far as Christian Brown's value, you make a fantastic point about the fact that he's really good on fast breaks. And that's kind of a very important staple of his game because he's not a good shooter. And really all his offensive skill set is cutting, right? And occasionally knocking down a corner three. Back when he came off the bench, this was a fantastic role for him, right? Especially in the playoffs, because when the game slowed down, you could put him in and his skill set was solid enough that he would be super high energy. He would get those steals or help force those defensive turnovers. And, he'd be able to get fast break opportunities more. But now that he has more responsibility in the starting lineup, when the game slows down in the postseason, it's just not the same type of thing because he has to worry about being a much bigger contributor than he used to. So that's a thought I wanted to share about Christian Brown. But yeah, I mean, that contract is just going to be an absolute mess for them going forward in all likelihood. Maybe the craziest thing in the world happens. Maybe Christian Brown becomes like an absolutely incredible 15 to 17 point per game scorer this season, and Peyton Watson just takes like a massive step backwards to what he's kind of been up until last season. That would be the craziest thing in the world, but I don't think it's likely. I guess we'll find out though. So yeah, fair enough. But Spencer Jones, yeah, good contract for Spencer Jones. Another comment, they need a backup point guard for sure. Someone who can be a solid sixth man. I think that they also need to give Strother a chance at the backup too, because when he's played, he's been pretty good. I think Strother would currently be the backup too. And so I think even when we did our end of season recap several months ago now, I was like, he's got to be the guy who is given an opportunity now in year 4 to be the backup too. He just has to be. Otherwise, you should get rid of him. Yep. Right. And so, I mean, we're on the same page about that. Yeah, Eric. So you think Strother is going to be the backup too, and they're not looking to add a backup shooting guard like a Tim Hardaway, like they did last offseason?
Yeah, I don't think so, because it's exactly what you said. I mean, at this point, the Nuggets have to be looking out for, with everything that they do, with every move that they make, they have to be thinking, okay, well, if we did trade this guy, what could he get us back? And Strother, I think, is a guy who if they find out halfway through the season before the trade deadline that, hey, he's not the right fit for us, but he can get us something back in return, they're going to have to make those decisions about people. And I think, you've had 3 years, you're going into your 4th year now. You should know exactly who he is. I would love to see him have, get an opportunity where he's, kind of guy who's getting 22, 25 minutes a game, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you. Now, they kind of messed around with his role a little bit last offseason, right? Trying to get him some minutes at the point guard position in summer league, trying to, maybe give him some more ball handling responsibility in the regular season. I think they should just let him be a 2 guard and grow in that role, because that's what he's been good at. There's no reason to change him right now when the Nuggets are in win now mode. And he's demonstrated that he can be a solid, reliable shooter and guy who can come off pick and rolls, hit that floater, etc. And so, yeah, they should just let him grow as backup 2 on this team, 100%. Another comment, I also think CB will perform better this year. Last year, he was injured like all year. I think give him a year to bounce back, or at least till trade deadline. If he doesn't perform better, try trading. Yeah, right. I mean, he's never really been a good shooter, right? So the question, even when he's been healthy, has still been about his skill set, not necessarily his health. Even going back to college, these were issues that were noted in his scouting report. And so I guess that's something the Nuggets like doing, drafting guys who have high potential or like a specific focus, but have glaring issues in their game, think that they can develop those guys and work those issues out. And like you've seen with Zeke Naji and now Christian Brown, presumably, it's just hard to do that with a guy at the NBA level. They're kind of just resorted to being high quality role guys who come off the bench for like 10, 15, 20 minutes. But I mean, do you see CB significantly improving his skill set next season?
No, I mean, it's the NBA, so I'm not going to say he couldn't. It's out of the realm of possibility. But it's funny. You just talked about the 2 guys on the team who ultimately, I feel, are really the 2. Okay, look, we've got Jamal, we've got Aaron Gordon, and we've got Joker. Those 3 guys, I think we can all, as Nuggets fans, agree they deserve the contracts that they have. I mean, without them, we're not going to be, without any one of those 3 guys, we're not going to be a championship team. But the funny thing is, you've got the lead weight contract of Christian Brown and the lead weight contract of Zeke Naji. And we just talked about those guys as those kind of guys who are drafted with all of this potential, who just ultimately kind of ended up being duds. But somewhere along the line, they were able to convince the Nuggets front office that they needed a massive pay raise. And that's kind of why we're in the spot that we're in, is because they've given those big pay raises to those 2 guys. When gosh, I just keep saying, I just keep coming back to this. Peyton Watson and Christian Brown were drafted in the exact same draft class. Why would you jump ahead 2 seasons on Christian Brown before you ever had to make a decision? Injuries are part of the game. I get it. That's not something that you could have foreseen, but I don't know. He just doesn't ever strike me as a guy. I'm just down on Christian Brown, I guess. He doesn't strike me as a guy who deserves to be making that kind of money. Nothing against him personally. I know he's a great competitor and super athletic young guy who does have skills. I hope they do translate. I hope he does. I hope he is in the gym working harder than everybody else, improving that 3-point shot, and getting it back to where it used to be, or better than what it used to be. But I don't think that's going to be him. It wasn't him in college, and it wasn't him in his first 4 seasons.
Yeah, he's a high quality role player who's kind of just overpaid. Right. That's just the bugaboo that we're stuck with. But oh well. Yeah. Right. 5 years, 125 million for Brown is still crazy. Completely agree with that comment. Yeah, that's been expanded upon a lot so far, and it's kind of costing us right now, especially in this era of the NBA salary cap rules. Last comment right now. I think in the 2024 season, he shot 40% from 3. I don't know how much the volume was, but that's above average. So he was getting a lot better at shooting. I guess we'll see how it goes. Really, did Christian Brown shoot near 40% from 3 a few years ago?
I think he did, and that's where I'm saying if he can get back to that, if Christian Brown is a 40 to 45% 3-point guy, now 45 is asking a lot. I mean, don't get me wrong, but hey, it's okay to ask a lot from a guy who makes that kind of money. That's how I feel. So. I think that he is hopefully somebody. I mean, certainly the Nuggets front office is counting on him to be that guy. I just don't think he can be.
Dang, yeah, 39.7% from 3 in 2024, 2025. That's actually insane. I don't even remember that. Wow, wild. Yeah, crazy. Hopefully,
but look, did I read this stat right too? Though that. And I don't know the volume, but Spencer Jones was like a 69% 3-point shooter in the playoffs last year.
Led the postseason in 3-point shooting percentage, yes.
So that just shows you that sometimes stats don't tell the whole story. I mean, I'm glad we got Spencer Jones, but is he the best 3-point shooter in the league? No.
All right, here's a fun question before we transition into Peyton Watson. Spencer can technically play the 2, right? He's 6'6"-ish, 6'7". Would you rather see Spencer Jones start at the 2 over Christian Brown right now?
So the reason why, I'm kind of torn on that. I wouldn't hate that. If we're going to experiment with lineups, let's experiment with them. The reason why I kind of like that is because exactly what you said earlier about Christian Brown when he was in his first and second season coming off of the bench. That was like the perfect role for him. That's where you saw him. He was able to against second teamers, he was able to use his strengths better than he is against first teamers. And then when you add on the extra, we're expecting X, Y, and Z out of you as a starter, making whatever you're making, it's extra pressure. I feel like he was kind of a guy who, when you brought him in off the bench, that's where he excelled. And so that's why I wouldn't hate it, but it's going to be a tough pill to swallow for somebody who makes that kind of money to come off of the bench. When we talked about egos, I don't know that would go over well.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a good transition into Peyton Watson, because look, if the Nuggets re-sign Peyton Watson, this issue just gets way worse, right? Not just financially, but also just from an ego management, ball usage management, et cetera. It just becomes way harder. But as far as Peyton Watson is concerned, here's the most recent news with Peyton Watson, okay? Denver has actually offered him a 5-year, $70 million deal. Yes. $14 million AAV. for a guy who was asking in the 22 to 23 range and who the Nuggets said they were willing to match up to $30 million a year for. They offered him $14 million a year AAV over 5 years. Okay, so that's the offer currently on the table. He's not going to take that in all likelihood. Okay. Now, Denver doesn't want a deal to exceed that $22 million AAV. Obviously, Watson wants more than that. But Watson is also considering playing out this season on his $6.5 million qualifying offer, right? And then testing unrestricted free agency next offseason. So that's kind of interesting, an interesting development. Teams are still interested in him in sign and trade, obviously, and the list kind of just keeps growing week by week. The Clippers are still in there, kind of. Atlanta is still in there. Milwaukee is still in there. And Cleveland actually just recently joined that list. In fact, James Harden, who still is not technically signed, but is expected to re-sign with the Cavs, is actually pushing his signing back to, quote unquote, allow the Cavs to poke around Peyton Watson, right? You probably waited for the LeBron sweepstakes to come to an end. And obviously the Cavs are trying to improve the three, right? Max Strus as your starting three. Are you going to win a championship with Max Strus starting at your three? Probably not. And so, I mean, poking around Peyton Watson's not a bad idea for the Cleveland Cavaliers in a sign and trade. Denver still wants now, well, they've kind of changed their asking price, right? Initially, they wanted about a Walker Kessler type of return in exchange for P. Watt, right? 2 first-round picks, unprotected, and 2 swaps, something in that range. Now they've reduced it to 1 high-level player and a first-round pick in a sign and trade. So that's the current situation with Peyton Watson. So I guess let's start here. Eric, what do you think about how this is developing? How are you processing the contracts that have been offered, the contracts that Peyton Watson is kind of considering, and just some of the opportunities here for sign and trade potentially, since the Nuggets are already in the second apron and have to either get rid of him or get rid of someone else?
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer because I really like Peyton Watson. I said really from the get-go when they drafted him, I liked him. And I've always been a fan. So I think that he is a guy who's just going to continue to get better. Probably not going to happen on the Nuggets. And I think that unfortunately Nugget fans probably just need to come to that realization that he's going to be on a different team come the very near future. Now, what team that is, I think that's where the Nuggets still have a little bit of control. We've talked about a number of different potential trades, and look, I still am a fan of, potentially trying to make something happen with the Bucks. You start talking about teams, though, when you're talking about trading a high-level player and a potential first-round draft pick, I would imagine you'd probably want to target teams that are going to be, in the top half of the draft. So teams that are not going to be very good. Well, Cleveland's pretty good. I think the Clippers, they're like on the fringe, right? They're one of those teams that could be good. The Bucks, though, they're certainly kind of in that rebuild phase right now. So I think that's kind of why I like the Bucks. I do think Atlanta is another one of those teams where they're kind of on the up. They're coming up. I think they're probably going to be a playoff team. So to me, I would be trying to do something with the Bucks. That's just me. I really liked the trade scenario that I think the person who was making commented on one of our last shows with Porter Jr., Kevin Porter Jr. on the Bucks. And a first-round draft pick. So, but that might be even too expensive now at this point. I don't know what Porter Jr.'s contract looks like. So, the bottom line is, yeah, you as a Nugget fan, it's going to be a tough pill to swallow, but you're probably going to have to wake up to the realization that Peyton Watson is most likely played his last game in a Nuggets jersey, and just going to have to be okay with that.
Yeah, I'm taking a look. Oh, okay. Kevin Porter Jr. is on a 2-year, $10.5 million contract.
So that I think then that's kind of, I think, in the Nuggets wheelhouse. You're eliminating some of that contract pressure. You certainly can't afford 20+ million with Peyton Watson. And I think we talked about Porter Jr. having that ability, he can kind of play. He can be a 2, but he can also play a little bit of backup point guard. So that's where I really like that trade. The more that I looked into that and looked at Kevin Porter Jr., that one kind of really stood out to me as something that I'm surprised the Nuggets haven't looked at more closely.
Yeah, and here's the thing I like the most about the Bucks sign and trade situation. Recently, another report that came up is that the Bucks might be willing to take Zeke Naji in some sort of Peyton Watson sign and trade. And so, like, if I'm the Nuggets, I'm immediately trying to make that happen. Unless it's the case that they're trying to move off of a Christian Brown or Cam Johnson still, which it doesn't look like they're trying to do. As soon as I know that the Bucks are willing to take Zeke Naji and a Peyton Watson sign and trade, I am immediately interested in them only. Yep. Okay. So if we were to start thinking about like a potential sign and trade situation here, what would you think? Now, assuming this is possible, I don't know how many first, second round pick swaps that the Bucks have specifically, but if this was the deal, would you take it or not? Okay, you send Peyton Watson and Zeke Naji to the Bucks in exchange for Kevin Porter Jr. and 2 second-round picks.
I think I'd do that. I think the second-round picks, that's kind of going to be a tough one to swallow. But again, the Nuggets are in a position where they don't have a lot of choices. And if you're going to get rid of one of those 2 lead weights that I talked about with regards to Zeke Naji, I think that's something that you do.
Yeah, right. Because you get a backup point guard. I'm presuming he'd play the backup point guard, right? Yep. Kevin Porter Jr. Solid size. He's not going to be a great shooter, but he's going to be like a Christian Brown who can dribble a lot better. And he's going to be able to do some things in theory with the second unit. Tyus Jones is probably the better official point guard, but that's just not a luxury the Nuggets have right now. And so in this deal, you get a Kevin Porter Jr. back. You get some draft capital, right? 2 second-round picks. Not terrible. It's not a first-round pick, right? Which is unfortunate. But you are able to move off of Peyton Watson effectively, right? And you're able to get rid of Zeke Naji's contract, which has just been another killer. And so I think this is a win-win, as much as a win-win could be established in this current situation. And I would absolutely take that. That's a deal I would, if I got that deal as the Nuggets, I would take that in a heartbeat. So, I mean, it'd be interesting to see what the Nuggets are looking at right now, because there's clearly an impasse. So I wonder what they're waiting for, right? Are they waiting for Peyton Watson maybe to accept the qualifying offer or turn down their contract before looking at some sign and trade options? It seems like the timing is just kind of a bit unclear, but yeah, it's kind of strange. Any thoughts on why the Nuggets might still be waiting to get something done with this?
I think a lot of it was waiting on LeBron. I mean, we talked about that a couple weeks ago, where I think the whole league, including the commissioner, was waiting on, TV contracts and things like that for the LeBron deal to get done. You just talked about it a second ago with James Harden. I think you're exactly spot on. He didn't sign with the Cavs because he wanted to see what LeBron did. Now, now that we know he's not going to sign there, James Harden is kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to wait and see what the Cavs are able to get, what other pieces can they get, and then we'll kind of fit me back in. But the NBA it's kind of weird sometimes. I mean, you see contracts going to guys that are, you kind of, everybody gets big contracts in the NBA. I mean, don't quote me on this, but I feel like I remember that this could be a dream, but I feel like Timothy Mozgov, didn't he sign like a $90 million contract or something crazy? Guys like that get these types of contracts, but here's Peyton Watson, pretty good up and coming guy who, he can't even get an offer sheet. So I don't know. The NBA is weird, but I do think that the LeBron decision plays a factor.
Yeah, for sure. For sure it does. I mean, as far as Peyton Watson and him not receiving any sign and trade offers or offer sheets thus far, I mean, you almost have to wonder how much teams are taking into consideration the fact that he was hurt at the end of last year. Right. And the fact that he came on the scene so spontaneously. Like he had demonstrated flashes of what we eventually saw him put together overall last year. But the fact that in a very specific situation, he was able to really just thrive as a player fundamentally, several 30-point games, still playing solid defense so quickly, and then to get hurt and not play the rest of the season after getting hurt again for the second time, right? Because he got hurt, came back, and then got hurt again, right? I wonder how much that factors into the equation here too. So there's just so many unknown variables that I think if I was Peyton Watson, I might actually just take the qualifying offer this season and play it out. Obviously, it's not going to be the situation he probably wants, right? Because again, that's kind of an unknown, right? How does he come back and play after the injury in a new season? But it's a tough situation really for everyone, not just the Nuggets, not just other teams, but him too, right? It's like, what do I do for my future? What's the best decision for me to make? So it's a very interesting situation overall. But yeah, we'll be tracking the Peyton Watson ordeal as it develops over the next few weeks. But it's clear, regardless, the Nuggets have to make a move, even without signing Peyton Watson. I think you mentioned this earlier, talking about the second apron, right? The Nuggets currently are still in the second apron without Peyton Watson. And so, I mean, maybe if you want to tell us a little bit more about how the second apron works and give us an idea of how you think the Nuggets might be able to get out of it, I think that might be a fun way to end today's episode.
Yeah, so I will be the first to admit I was not and still am not an expert on the second apron, but I have dug into it a little bit just to try and see, because I was like, man, you hear that it's really this place that no NBA team wants to be, but what does it really mean? Like, what are the ramifications of a team being over the second apron? So there's really four main things that being over the second apron does. The first one is, and I'm kind of paraphrasing. I'm trying to go off of my notes here, but you're severely restricted with regards to the trades that you can make and the mechanics within those trades. So once a team is over the second apron, you can't do anything. It's called salary aggregation. So you cannot combine two or more players' salaries in a trade to take back a higher paid player. So for example, you can't take a guy making 15 million and a guy making 10 million, combine them and bring back a guy making 25 million. You can't do that. It has to be a one for one. Another thing with regards to trade is there's no outgoing trade exceptions, so no TPE. They can't use any previously generated trade exceptions to absorb incoming players. So that's something that is really a hindrance. That's one of the big things you hear about when you trade people is you get that TPE that comes along with that trade. So that's kind of a hindrance. We talked about strict salary matching. You cannot accept more salary in any trade than what you send out, not even by $1. So that's something that's very strict with being over the second apron. And then another thing you hear about a lot with trades, you hear so and so got traded for cash considerations. Well, you can't do that when you're over the second apron. You can't trade for cash considerations. So that's number one with regards to the trade mechanics. The second thing is your free agency and roster. Filling out that roster, you have multiple constraints. So you lose that mid-level exception, the taxpayer mid-level exception. You don't get it anymore. So Denver loses their ability to offer a free agent that mid-tier, that $5 to $6 million contract. Really think of like bench players. You don't get that mid-level exception anymore. Minimum contracts and draft picks only, outside of re-signing their own free agents via the bird rights. There's any external additions, so free agents, it's restricted strictly to veteran minimum contracts or rookie deals. That's a really big hindrance. So you're not going to be able to build up a good team signing guys off of just vet minimums. even though LeBron just took essentially a vet minimum. And then, you've got your buyout market. So I know we're this is kind of weird because we're not in season, but imagine we were in season. If a player were released via a buyout, we would not be able to go after that player who was bought out with anything larger than that non-taxpayer mid-level exemption. So with regards to filling out the roster, it makes it really difficult. The third thing is future draft picks. Now, luckily, the Nuggets aren't here yet. So the current collective bargaining agreement, it adds a long-term draft penalty for teams that are over the second apron for multiple years. So if you're a team who has been in the over the second apron for 2 years in a row, the team's first round draft pick 7 years into the future becomes immediately frozen. They cannot trade that draft pick under any circumstances. So it's not an immediate impact, but you're hurting yourself in the future, 7 years down the road. And then there's something called the 3 and 5 rule. So if you're a team who has been over the second apron three years out of the last 5, that frozen 7th year pick automatically drops to the absolute end of the first round. So it becomes the 30th pick, regardless of what your record was. So if you were the worst team in the league, doesn't matter. Your pick is number 30. And then the fourth thing that really is kind of it's the luxury tax. This is the piece for the owners, right? This is where it's not like a dollar for dollar. When you sign somebody when you're over the second apron. Let's say we'll use Peyton Watson as the example. So right now the Nuggets are over the second apron by signing Spencer Jones for that $12 million contract. It essentially made the luxury tax that the Nuggets front office is going to have to pay about $68 million. If they signed, if they signed Peyton Watson to just the no contract extension, it's just his current, what did you say it was, $6.5 million offer? Yeah, if they sign that, if he signs that, their luxury tax jumps to over $120 million. So it more than doubles, even though they're only taking on an additional $6.5 million in contracts. So that tax just goes up by a ridiculous amount. I mean, if they did sign him to like a 20 plus million, $25 million contract, I mean, you're talking the Nuggets would be in a luxury tax of over $250 million. So those are the kinds of things that are really going to open an owner's eyes and say, hey, we can't do this, because we know, even though they can afford it, rich guys typically don't like to pay fines, right? They don't like to spend that money that they made. They like to make more money. Yeah. So, those are really the four. I know that's a lot, kind of, because each one of those things has multiple tiers inside of it. But those are the four things that really kind of hinder you when you're over that second apron. And look, it is not a place that you want to be for an extended period of time. Now, to get out from under that second apron, essentially the Nuggets have up until the final day of the salary cap year. The salary cap year is typically June 30th or July 1st, I guess, is the first day of the new year. So they have about the longest window that they could possibly have, because it doesn't happen again until next June 30th. They have essentially a year to get out from under that second apron. So they have a good amount of time to be able to do it. But this is what we were talking about earlier in the show. This is the time where the Nuggets are going to have to start making some of those moves, make some of those difficult decisions. And us as fans, we're probably going to have to wave goodbye to some of those players that we really like. And it just sucks, because it's not for any other reason than they have to get under that second apron. There's just no, you heard the things that I discussed. It's too constrictive. It makes it to where you're at a complete disadvantage if you're a team over the second apron. And to be the only team in the NBA over the second apron, then you just got kind of like the scarlet letter that goes along with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so that was a lot. But I mean, regardless of that fact, I mean, nothing you said there sounded good. So
No.
like in summary, second apron equals absolutely terrible financial situation. Nice. Good to know. So they're not going to have some work to do. It's good to know that they don't have necessarily to do it in like the most immediate time frame, but they still will have to do it because
Yep.
you can't be paying $250 million for this roster. Like if you had a solid roster that was more built out from a depth perspective, it's more understandable, right? You're trying to win now. But this is not a Nuggets team that should be in the second apron at all. So moves have to be made. Okay. Final point or final question on this topic. Then we can wrap up the episode with our last brief note of news. But which of these two combinations would you rather have? Would you rather not have Peyton Watson and that be the case? Or would you rather not have Christian Brown and Cam Johnson and start Spencer Jones at the 3 and Peyton Watson at the 2, if you could?
Well, I probably would pick the second option. I'd probably take Spencer Jones at the 3, Peyton Watson at the 2, because I don't think Cam Johnson is in the Nuggets' long-term plans. I think he's in a contract year, and I don't think that the Nuggets are going to sign him moving forward. So I think Cam Johnson's probably one of those guys as a Nuggets fan. And I could be wrong, but I don't think he's in the plans for 5 years from now. Whereas if we sign Peyton Watson, I think he's then you're kind of building a team that you can continue to build around.
Yeah, I would agree. Even beyond that, I just like the player fit, right? I would much rather have Spencer Jones and Peyton Watson, who are 2, 3, and D wings, who have had at least stints of proven success in the starting rotation, over Christian Brown and Cam Johnson, who are both overpaid and whose performance just isn't consistent enough for me to be like, yeah, I want both of them in the starting lineup, not just this season, but long term. So nice. Yeah, that was a fun question. Okay, we're about done with the episode. Last bit of news we can touch on briefly is the fact that we mentioned 2 weeks ago the Nuggets were digging around for a top assistant candidate to be the lead assistant on David Adelman's staff. They went out and they did hire Dave Yeager to fill that position. Now, I mean, Dave Yeager, solid defensive coach. That's what he's been known for over the course of his head coaching career and assistant career as well. But I mean, he took a 25th ranked Memphis defense in the 2010s and turned them into a top 3 defense in the NBA that was able to challenge some of the forces in the Western Conference during the early 2010s. And so that's Dave Yeager's highlight of his career. I mean, he was a head coach of Sacramento for a little bit. It wasn't even the worst of situations for him, but I mean, he had some disagreements with the front office about some personnel decisions and rotations and stuff like that, and they ended up letting him go. And so it's been an unfortunate head coaching run for Dave Yeager since his success with the Grizzlies. But are you happy about the Nuggets adding him as the lead assistant to Adelman?
Yeah, I don't like it. I guess I hate to be redundantly. I hate to be redundant, but with a double negative. But I think he's a good coach. And ultimately, I do think what it does is it gives the Nuggets a little bit of protection. If we get off to a really slow start or a poor start and things aren't kind of shaking out the way that they do, and the Nuggets front office says, okay, we're going to make some really drastic moves, and who knows, we get to a point where maybe Aaron Gordon shipped out and Cam Johnson shipped out, and maybe things start to happen. I think that's somebody that they can look to replace Adelman with is Dave Yeager. But hopefully we don't get to that. That's not what I don't think that's the reason why they hired him. I do think that it's more about the ability to coach defense. But I will say, you touched on it in the last show, I think. He's still bound to the players that he has. So, he's not going to make Nikola Jokic an all-world defender.
So you're going to add like 10 inches of vertical to Nikola Jokic?
Right.
If you can do that, he's just absolutely insane and incredible. But yeah, I mean, It's solid for what it is, right?
Yeah.
You already know that as soon as the Nuggets hit a rough patch at any point during the upcoming season, there will be hundreds of Instagram comments calling for David Alderman to be fired and for Dave Yeager to be made the interim head coach. You already know that's going to happen. So we can actually just get ahead of that early right now. So that we hope that does not happen. And it's probably not likely to happen. But I mean, it depends on how the Nuggets do this season. I mean, I guess, again, we're complaining about the Nuggets being in this situation because they've drastically not met expectations. But they were still like they were a 54-win team last season, right? It's the best record they've had since that 57-win team, right, in the early 2010s. So it's like, from a regular season productivity perspective, this was not a terrible team last season. They just drastically underexceeded in the postseason because they ran into the buzzsaw of Minnesota, who was just built to beat them and them only. So tough situation to be in if you're the Denver Nuggets. But I mean, assuming the Nuggets just don't fall to like a 45-win team in 2027, I mean, Adelman's job is probably secure. But yeah, it'll be cool to see what Yeager can do with his expertise and his experience. I mean, the Nuggets have been able to be good enough defensively to win a championship with Nikola Jokic. And so it's definitely possible. It's just a schematic issue, right? And maybe an effort issue too, right? Hopefully Yeager can toughen up the guys a little bit more, because the team last year just had such extended droughts of just vigor and like oomph and like just hard-nosed basketball play. And so really, hopefully that's what I hope he can make from a practical impact perspective on this team, is just get the guys to play that kind of hard-nosed ball, kind of like KCP was able to do as a player, right? Jeff Green, I guess, too, from that 2022, 2023 team. But yeah, Nuggets don't have guys like that, so it'll be Yeager's job to kind of fill that void. Any final thoughts before we wrap up today's episode?
You know, I know we talked a lot, and I'm really glad that you talked about that being, you know, the Nuggets were a 54-win team last year. Sometimes around here, around Denver, we do kind of get to that the sky is falling when, you know, there's nothing quite falling yet. So maybe we should pump the brakes on all of that. This is still a really good team. We still are in a championship window, although it's probably really, really small at this point. But look, we have the best player in the world on our team for this season, at least. Let's hope for a healthy season from all of our guys, and, you know, let the chips fall where they lay. I mean, that is all we can ask for. And I think if health is on the Nuggets side next year, I still like their chances against most teams in the NBA.
Yep, I'm going to be right there with you. It might not be exactly the team we're looking for, but I think at least from a starting lineup perspective, you've got 4 core guys from your championship team still there. You've got Cam Johnson now with a full season under his belt on this team. Maybe he finds a better way to fit into the offense schematically. He ended up being having one of the best Nuggets 3-point shooting seasons of all time, actually, by this season's end. Right. So there was improvement from Cam Johnson over the course of the season. Hopefully he comes out next season and plays well. Hopefully some of these guys off the bench who have pretty solid like one skill emphases can really make those skills shine in the limited minutes that they get off the bench. But it'll be a very interesting season. All that to say, and it'll be interesting to see how the Nuggets fill out their last 5 roster spots as they attempt to continue to compete in the Western Conference with teams that are much younger than them, much more athletic than them, much more skilled than them, like the Thunder, like the Spurs. And I guess now in the East with some of the more veteran experienced teams like the Knicks and the 76ers, it'll be interesting to see how the Nuggets do. But we'll continue to track how they do in free agency. And obviously we'll be back here with you guys next Friday evening, hopefully with some interesting news to discuss. But till then, take care. Thank you all for watching and have a great week.